Greetings, everyone. My name is Brenda Walker, and I'm here on behalf of the great duo team, Charles and Inez Barron, who, because of unforeseen circumstances, are not able to make tonight's show. There's another engagement going on at the moment. So, to sit in for them today is myself, Brenda Walker, who's co-chair of Operation Power, along with the executive director, Kiru Kuchiru. So we will be introducing a program, an ongoing program we've been having, The Road to Socialism. Socialism is back with our very esteemed Omali Yeshitela, who is the chairman of the African Socialist movement. And I'm just going to read a brief bio. So Chairman Omali Yeshitela of the African People's Socialist Party began his political life in the 1960s, involved in the civil rights movement through SNCC, where he registered Black voters. Additionally, in 1966, while protesting at City Hall in St. Petersburg, Florida, he boldly tore down a racist mural. Chairman Yeshitela later founded the Uhuru Movement for African Liberation. The organization has been at the forefront of fighting for reparations since the 1970s. It has been a successful model in initiating over 50 Black community and economic institutions across the United States and Africa. These include building community gardens, establishing recreation programs, building basketball courts, offering doula training, operating bakeries, restaurants, furniture stores, farm markets, providing disaster relief, and rehabilitating housing units in St. Louis, Missouri, and so much more. But before we get into that, I just want to do what we normally do as an African people, and that's called a libation. So I'm going to ask Kiru to cue up the libations video, and we'll do the libations.
Nothing important happens without a libation. And so for this very important presentation, we begin by the pouring of libation. We pour libation first to our first ancestor, to that hidden one who, though hidden, manifests in all things as all things, that God-Goddess idea in the universe by any and all names. To our first ancestor, we pour libation, Ashe. We pour libation too to our ancestors because they were the first people on this planet, mothers and fathers of all mankind, flashpoint of the human family. To those ancestors, we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to our ancestors because they were the ones who first gave birth to the idea of civilization, knew we would need a form of governance, and they nurtured that idea along the Nile until it reached its zenith in Kemet. There they built these gigantic monuments as evidence of that great civilization, and they carved instructions on the walls of temples and tombs for us, so we would never forget. To those ancestors, we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to our ancestors because over time they put together all the tenets of civilization, and they took those ideas and left the continent. They were the people of the first Exodus. They left Africa and went all over the world and peopled the world. To those ancestors, we pour libation, Ashe. We pour libation too to our ancestors because they did not sit on their laurels. They continued to improve, continued to evolve, and at each point of evolution, they again would leave the continent and settle and resettle the planet. They met themselves coming and going. To those ancestors, we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to those ancestors because over time, they found themselves the object of a forced exodus when they were kidnapped, shackled, cargoed, shipped out of Africa and enslaved in diasporas around the world. To those ancestors, we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to the ancestors left at home, the very young, the aged, the infirm, left to reinvent themselves, depleted of us, human resources. But they were enjoined by us in the diasporas, both objects of a global myopia that ruptured the soul of a people as it ravaged a continent. To those ancestors, we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to those ancestors because over time they began to remember who and what they were. Because no matter where they had been dropped off, they still retained bits and pieces of who and what they were. They retained that African core that described them. They began to remember bits and pieces of a song. They began to remember lines from a rhythm. They began to remember dances that they did in ancient times. They began to remember those ancient drum beats that they now beat out on bare skin. And so to those ancestors, we pour libation. Ashe, pour libation too to them, because they then began to teach each other. They began to resurrect and reconstruct that history and that culture. They became
So normally we would, in a live program,
the
ask
new
people,
Africans wherever they.
so you can call on your ancestor in your respective places and give them an ashe. And then we're going to move on to introducing Operation Power, who we are, what we stand for. And again, I'm going to ask Kiru to cue up the video.
Operation Power stands for people organizing and working for empowerment and respect.
Operation Power is a grassroots social justice organization founded by local community stakeholders, which includes activists, organizers, and leaders who understand that the system as it is currently structured is destroying us and our communities.
The system, the capitalist system, one that promotes human greed over human need, one that promotes profit over people, needs to be dismantled. These local community organizers recognize capitalism needs to be destroyed and replaced with socialism.
Operation Power was founded in 1997 with the understanding that uprooting capitalism needs to begin locally. Operation Power understood that our communities are the perfect vehicle to dismantle this parasitic capitalist system brick by brick, and the economic, political, and cultural institutions and other systems in place in our local community infrastructure. Whether it's the local school board, community board, city council, state assembly, all represents mechanisms to control the destiny of our people.
Okay.
Talk about the book.
All right. So now, of course, we want to introduce to you some books from authors that are part of Operation Power. And of course, I'm sorry, I have my copy right here. Speaking Truth to Power. These are articles and essays on revolution, Black radical politics, and leadership by our very own Charles Barron. Also, It's Not You, It's Capitalism by our very own Malika Jabali. This is a great read. I encourage you all to read this book along with Speaking Truth to Power, so you get some more insight on what socialism is and so forth, and capitalism. And we have another book. I think that's it for now. So one more book. I'm sorry. Okay, so we have one more book, and I believe that's from another Barron, Kevin Barron, and he has a few books actually. But we're just going to cue up the video right now so we can get it on screen so you can see the book that we're talking about, because I'm not sure which one we're.
There's a bit of a lag, so we can just go to the chairman.
Okay, I'm sorry. So we're having those issues that go on when you're going live. So we're going to bring on the chairman right now. Peace, Chairman.
Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Good to see you and talk to your sister Brenda.
To see you again.
And Brother Kiru.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It's always an honor to have you on the show. You know, you're one of our favorite guests, so we're really, really glad to be discussing socialism today, particularly at a time when, and going back to your book where you said, you know, imperialism or American capitalism is essentially on the ropes. So we were hoping that maybe we could start with you talking a little bit about what the, you know, by what you mean when you say the road to socialism is black.
Yeah, I think that's a really important question, because there are many of us who have come to understand that there's a problem with capitalism. But we found that's not significant. It's not enough to recognize that capitalism is a problem. We've been having this discussion for a very, very long time with a variety of people on all kinds of platforms and in all kinds of venues. What's really important is to recognize not just capitalism, but parasitic capitalism. And we say parasitic capitalism because there are some who, including Lenin, who was a really important kind of revolutionary, led the Russian Revolution of 1917 and made some really impressive kinds of contributions to developing ideas around socialism. And what he characterized as imperialism was capitalism that had turned rotten right. And he said one of the features, one of the aspects of capitalism, of imperialism, is capitalism that has become parasitic. Well, we say capitalism was born parasitic, that it has its origin in what Karl Marx characterizes as primitive accumulation of capital. Where the hell does this begin? Everybody knows even to open up a candy store in the neighborhood, you have to have some startup resources, startup money. You have to have, so where does it come from? And Karl Marx called this startup money primitive accumulation. He says that in order to understand capitalist production, you have to recognize capitalist accumulation is absolutely necessary. But you can't have capitalist accumulation, he said, without capitalist production. So how the hell do we get this capitalist accumulation? How do we get this accumulation? He says we have to presuppose that there was an accumulation of capital that came before capitalist production. And he said we call this primitive accumulation. He said this included the war, the attack that was made on East India's, that whole area of the world where India is located. It was tearing the Aboriginal people in what's now called the Americas into the mines, bringing up gold and silver and what have you for the colonizers there. And then he said that it was turning Africa into a warren for the commercial hunting of black skins. He said this is the startup of it. He says that this has as much significance in political economy as original sin in theology. This is where it all began. And so what he described is colonialism. He didn't call it colonial, he called it primitive accumulation of capital, the startup of capital. But he was defining colonialism because the capitalist system is something that was born as white power. Capitalism was born as white power. But white power was born as a consequence of the attack on the rest of us throughout the world. So we say the road to socialism is painted black because we recognize that we are living in a colonial mode of production, that all of what's necessary in the world today to produce and reproduce human life revolves around the colonial mode of production, this parasitic relationship that Europe has imposed on Africa, on Iranians, on Venezuelans, on people all around the world, on us in the Republic of Brooklyn, for that matter. It's this relationship that, and so any honest communist or socialist that wants to get rid of capitalism has to start off in the first place by attacking the colonial mode of production. And that's been the weakest part of the struggle for socialism that has existed in the world and in this country in particular, is the inability, the unwillingness of the so-called white left, of the so-called communists, the white communists, to unite fundamentally with the struggle against colonialism, seeing this is a strategic direction that the movement has to go. And that was true even with the era of the Black Panther Party. You saw that they didn't support the Black Panther Party struggle against colonialism. And they were criticized severely by Fred Hampton and other people around this. And the only time we saw the white left move in unity with the Black Panther Party was after the Black Panther Party had suffered so many casualties and attacked on so many different fronts. In 1972, it held in Oakland, California, the National Conference to Combat Fascism. And then you saw 9,000 people attend this conference that was organized by the Black Panther Party, and the majority of them were white. And they were there because when you said fascism, you're talking about where the conditions that we face as African people began to creep into the society, or threaten to creep into the society that white people enjoy, or the colonizers.
Right. So, and I'm also curious because I know in your book Uneasy Equilibrium, one of the things that you pointed out is this idea of almost like having forever wars, where the United States is constantly at war in order to be able to either control what's going on in other regions of the world or to really tap into their resources. Talk a little bit about how you see that, particularly today, with how the United States is attacking Iran, and even with the Russian-Ukrainian war, and how all this ties in together.
I appreciate that comment, Kiro, because the issue is that the U.S. and not just the U.S. The U.S. is just the hegemon. It's the leadership.
Right.
It's the key force right now, even if shakily so. Even if the alliances that revolve around colonialism are fracturing to some extent because of some growing disagreements or that people have had with how the U.S. has been running this thing. But what has transpired is that they have built this social system on something like an earthquake. It's on the colonization of the vast majority of the peoples of the world. So you have a situation where something like 50% of the people on the planet Earth are trying to survive off less than $10 a day. And you have where something like, 50% of $2.50 a day, and 80% of the people on the planet are trying to survive off something like less than $10 a day. This is a real tenuous situation. It's a life and death for everybody. So the vast majority of the people are constantly trying to struggle to change this relationship that we've had with colonial white power for 600 years, since Portugal first attacked Africa in 1415 and began the process of kidnapping us and forcibly dispersing us around the world and taking the resources that we have and initiating it for the first time in human history, a world economy that has its origin in the enslavement and dispersal of African people. And so there's this situation where our resources and our lives and genius are critical to the ongoing survival of this kind of social system. So there's permanent warfare that's going on. That's why there is an Iran. I mean, they want to start the Iranian thing like it just happened, yesterday. They want to start Venezuela. There was no such thing as Venezuela before slavery. It was our dispersal. There was no such thing as most of that. There was no such thing as what they characterize as the Middle East. What do you mean the Middle East? What map makes it the middle? It's defined as it has a relationship to Europe. Right. So and even when you look at places like Lebanon and Syria and Palestine and even this entity that they call Israel, it was something that was created in 1919 by French and British. Mm-hmm. So the people are trying to, all of us, the struggles that we're involved in right now in Brooklyn and in St. Louis, Missouri, are struggles that have their origin in this thing back then. And so there's a permanent kind of warfare that's going on because the people want to be free. And right. and the colonial powers are determined to maintain the status quo. And the status quo will not allow us to live. And so that's the thing we're talking about, permanent warfare that they're involved in, unless they commit genocide against everybody. Right. And that's not something we put beyond them, by the way.
Yeah, that's very true. And so I was hoping you could also touch on your theory, the theory that you developed of African internationalism.
And in many ways, in many ways, that's what we're talking about. Right. Because the fact is, as I've said, that there's one world economy, and that world economy has its origin in the attack on Africa and the forcible dispersal of Africans all around the world. And that's where there is a thing called Puerto Rico, there's a Jamaica, there's a so-called America. All of this stuff has its origin in the attack on Africa. That's why there's so-called 54 different Africans. None of these borders existed before the European attacked us. And these borders are effectively, they've created property lines and, revolving around private property, which is something that the colonizers created. Mm-hmm. And so this is what it is that all of us are having to deal with. So we say that that African people constitute one nation. We've a forcibly dispersed nation, and part of the struggle we're involved in is to reconnect ourselves as a people and to connect ourselves through the recapture of our national homeland, which is Africa. But not just our national homeland, because we exist in so many different places in the world, and all of that comes from Africa. And all of those resources belong to Africans and Africa. So we say that the real struggle we're involved in has to be the total, absolute, unconditional liberation of Africa and African people globally under the leadership, we believe, of the African working class. Because we're talking about a new kind of society, not this same old bourgeois society that produces the kinds of enemies that for us, even when we're supposed to be free. I mean, look at what the free Negroes have done for us now. You've seen them right there in Brooklyn, you know, after we're supposed to be free, you know, and they don't work for the masses of the people. Even when they get elected, they don't work for the masses of the people, which is one of the reasons the barons were such a big problem. Why they had to gang up and do everything they could to get rid of the barons, because the barons were represented not just black people in the general abstract sense of the word, but black people, you know, coming from the humblest kinds of circumstances, most oppressed circumstances, etc. And that's why there was no gentrification in East New York, where you are located, because the barons made it impossible for them to push us out at that time. Yeah.
Right. No, that's excellent. And, you know, particularly when you point out that, you know, you essentially have a very balkanized Africa. And I wonder how you would, you know, some of the challenges when people talk about Pan-Africanism, particularly under the banner of socialism, you know, they'll point to different cultures, different languages. But I think you've also mentioned I know, go ahead, man. That's how I raised
cultures? I mean, what different cultures? I mean, Ray Charles and Fela and James Brown, all the same. You understand? There's no different cultures. They're one culture. And the thing is that our culture is so ubiquitous that we don't even recognize it as African culture, because it's everywhere. Whether it's samba, you know, whether, you know, throughout the Americas, that's Africa speaking to us. And it speaks from so many directions that we don't even recognize. We talk about, we don't even recognize this as Africa. I mean, nothing offends me more, or probably something does, but to consider they like to talk about how jazz, only the American music. You know, what are you talking about? You know, I mean, you know, all of this is Africa and African people. So there are not that many cultures. One, two. The problem that we're talking about, sometimes we leave it as abstract issues that have to be debated, but they're practical contradictions that we're looking at. It's practical stuff that separated us from each other, not some idea. It wasn't, you know, like something came from outer space, even though Europeans like to promote that too, and separated us. They're practical, concrete things that human beings did. And we can do practical, concrete things to come back together, and that's what we're doing. So the African People's Socialist Party, it exists inside the United States, and you know, we can talk about various places where we exist inside the United States practically as organizations, etc. But we can also talk about the different provinces that we exist in South Africa, what they like to call is South Africa, and that we exist in Namibia, that we exist in Nigeria, that we exist in Ghana, that we exist in Sierra Leone, that we exist in so many places there. And then we are also in England and in France, and we have a presence. They don't have the same kind of organizational presence as this moment. We have a presence in Sweden. We have a presence in Belgium. We've had a big impact, and I just came out of a meeting maybe 2-3 hours ago, where we are spreading African internationalism through the Latin America front of the hands-off Uhuru movement that we created after they attacked us. So this is concrete, this is practical. And so we have this organizational presence that we are preparing to govern. We are preparing to govern. It doesn't make any sense to us to talk about how miserable we are and that we are in the struggle. We're not protesters as such. We're not involved in this just as protesters, just as quote unquote activists. Our objective is to become a liberated, self-governing population. And we've created the instruments through which that can occur. And the political party is the most significant primary instruments, but You can find us in so many different ways. You get a chance to talk about it, you can find us located through so many iterations, not just generally speaking around the world, but even, within the United States itself.
No, I completely agree with you, Chairman. And I'm going to bring Brenda in a minute, but I just have one last question for you. So you see some of the challenges, particularly with the Alliance of Sahel States, where they are trying to break away from, at least being under the thumb of France. They've kicked them out. But they're still undergoing practical challenges, particularly with regard to development. How, when you look at that situation, what's your take on it, and what would be some of the moves that they should be making, in addition to what that they've already done?
I really appreciate the alliance there. It's a real bold and dramatic move that's being made. And they have been assaulted, as you know, politically, ideologically, because somehow the military took over and there is no democracy. It was an undemocratic kind of thing. So it's democratic when white colonizers controlled it.
Right.
It's democratic when you've got a situation where, like in Niger, but France has 60% or so of its electrical power came from resources, uranium coming from Niger. But Niger is dark. There is no electrical power in Niger. And this is the kind of relationship between us, a parasite that sucks the blood, sucks the resources and things like that. So we know that. And so it's really important what we saw. And what you have in very, very draconian, repressive situations, it's very difficult for masses of people to get organized and build revolutionary organizations. We saw that even in Iran, under the Shah of Iran. So, because the masses could not easily get organized, there was organization, but the thing that was allowable was the mullahs, the Muslims, etc. And so it was through this venue that we saw the revolution, really grab hold to situation, mobilize people in the mosque, etc., and they overthrew the Shah. You had a similar situation because the military is something under these repressive entities. The military was designed to keep the people oppressed, etc. So the people, generally speaking, didn't have any freedom. You got to remember this. Who was it that kicked off the struggles inside the Sahel as we talk about it? It was the people. It was masses of people who rose up and demanded that France get the hell out. They were tearing up French flags, and they were calling on Russia because Russia, seemed to have been playing a positive role in terms of it's what it was doing in Africa. But there was the masses, and the military. Some of the young forces in the military, some dynamic forces in the military, moved because that's where the organization was. It was not among the masses. They didn't have revolutionary political parties as such. So the military seized that situation and did, generally speaking, a good job. Of course, they're still having to fight the imperialists through this. They call them jihadists. That's how they've been characterized. And that the modern jihad was something that was created by the United States when they used this organized and trained these Muslims to go into Afghanistan to fight against the Afghan government that was close to the Soviet Union that had eradicated the poppy so that most of the drugs were going, etc. So they trained. They're the ones who corralled and trained all of these Muslims and armed them to go into Afghanistan and to kill Russians and what have you. And those are the forces that are out there now that we're having to contend with in the Sahel region. And so they sick them on the people. They contribute to blowing up stuff, killing people, but the masses are being increasingly warned, especially by the stuff that's happening with P.O.W.E.R. And they're able to participate in their own development. They're able, for the first time in a long time, participate in their own development. And then they moved. I was concerned for a while because they were just saying, France, get out. But now they moved to ask all of the imperialists, all of the colonizers to get the hell out. And that's something that's happening. And so it's a shaky situation even now, because as you know, they've tried to overthrow Traore on a number of different occasions, and they killed a general. Was that general was it Mali?
Yeah, it was Mali.
Where they and Mali. I mean, you think about this. People are talking about how the United States is experiencing a 250-year anniversary, and then you got they're killing people, attacking countries like Iran. The societies that's a couple of thousand years old. And then you look at Mali. Look at Mali. I mean, in you had in Mali, this incredible movement. I mean, people were studying the universe in Mali. The Dogon studying the universe, knew how the calendar, how all of this stuff worked thousands of years ago. And then we are the ones who are under attack. So it's a fabulous kind of history, and the resistance is ours if we can unite and give organizational form to this unity. And so I like what we see in the Sahel. A weakness is right now they're surrounded by neo-colonial forces. As you remember, even as Ghana was standing up at the United Nations talking about how slavery is the worst crime committed, in human history, which is wonderful. That was something that came out of the Durban work that we participated in, and people you're close to right there in New York played an important role in that as well as we did. So now you have this situation where every effort is being made to contain the struggle of our peoples on every front. And what has to occur is that we have to dig in deeper, and we have to unite this, give organizational form to the disgust that all of us are experiencing around the world with this colonial relationship, which is one of the reasons they attacked us, because I mentioned how the party is locating in all these places. One of the few times where you see since the Garvey movement, where the African struggle was being pulled together as under collective leadership, and which is one of the reasons they attacked us, because of that, because we had pulled all these forces together. And that's what has to happen in the Sahel. The Sahel is surrounded by neo-colonial forces, etc. And I'm hoping that we sent somebody, by the way, when Thomas Sankara was there, we actually sent somebody to meet with Thomas Sankara. And the best we got was a basketball game, because we sent the wrong person. So the guy played basketball with Sankara, but we need to play ball on a different level, and we need to unite the struggle of African people so that there is what we consider is the U.S. front, what we do of the African Revolution. We see in England, we see the British front of the African Revolution, the Jamaican front of the African Revolution, the Nigerian front of the African Revolution. We are part of the same revolutionary project and process, and we have to give organizational coherence to that, practical organizational coherence, and that's what we've been working on for a number of years now. And I'm hoping that we can succeed in connecting in the best possible way with the comrades there in the Sahel.
No, that was great, Chairman. And speaking of Ghana, when we go back to the time Nkrumah was the first president of Ghana, he seemed to be facing the same challenges, where he was surrounded by essentially neo-colonial puppets. I think the president of not Ivory Coast, Humphrey Boni, who was really wedded to this idea of being under the French and having them, or rather working with them, that he thought would be able to usher in a level of development. That didn't happen, of course, and we saw what the French did in Guinea. So when we look at the Ghanaian experience, or Nkrumah's experience, in terms of trying to get Pan-Africanism off the ground, and I think he was trying to do it under scientific socialism. But then he experienced challenges where, the balkanized nature of the continent, a lot of the, leaders at the time, even El Selassie was very resistant to it. I do wonder whether we can still get to a place where the majority of African leaders would be able to say, this is the way to go, because as we stand as individual states, it is not likely that we're ever going to achieve the level of self-determination and freedom that is required for all of us to thrive in the continent. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
No, I don't think we'll ever get the leaders to do that. I
Okay.
think what has to happen is that we have to build organization among masses of people, like those people who kicked it off in the Sahel. The masses of people have to be given organization, ideology, and brought into the struggle, because the leaders, neocolonialism functions as an incubator for the African petty bourgeoisie. That's where it grows up in this neo-colonial thing. And what they did with Nkrumah, for example, they played this thing on Nkrumah. Nkrumah just wanted to be the leader of all of Africa. And Nkrumah just, et cetera, et cetera. And but the other thing that's true is that Nkrumah had won participation from the liberation movements. I mean, Cabral was there when he was engaged in struggling, and other independent forces, united and participated. Even people like Lumumba they came to Ghana, and you will hear, Sobukwe out of South Africa was at conferences called by Nkrumah. By the way, Martin Luther King was participated in Ghana's independence, et cetera. So you had this kind of thing, and Nkrumah was trying to make it happen. But it's not the balkanized nature of Africa that's responsible, because even under Garvey, I mean, what happened was the neocolonialism got consolidated as a continental-wide feature with the 1964. That was 63, wasn't it? 1963 founding of the Organization of African Unity. And Nkrumah was fighting like hell, going all the way into that. That OAU was consolidated on May 25th, 1963. You should read the speech that Nkrumah made on May 24th there at that 1963, where he said, "We got to leave here. We will betray our people, and if we leave Addis Ababa and this meeting without coming together as one African nation, without getting rid of the borders, etc., without creating a single African government, we will betray." And then he said, "This is what's going to happen if we don't do it." He said he talked about how neo-colonialism was going to thrive. He talked about how we would see entities being overthrown. Read that presentation by Nkrumah. And then you see why they had to come at Nkrumah. And then you see, and they ultimately killed him, in my estimation. But even progressive, quote unquote, not just people like, out of where was it, Senegal, but even people we bestowed so much prestige on, like Nyeri. All of them, balked at where Nkrumah wanted to go. But you saw Nasser tried to do it with him, and others. There were a few others who, Ben Bella out of Algeria, he wanted to do it. In fact, there was a meeting where I'm trying to remember this meeting. One of the meetings at this OAU meeting, somebody determined that what we need to do is the first thing we need to do is create a continental-wide bank. And Ben Bella had a remarkable response. He said, "We need a continental-wide blood bank, and we need to march on South Africa and destroy it. That's what we need, etc." So there was a willingness to do it. You had neo-colonial puppets. I mean, at that conference in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, that consolidated OAU, I've read that there were French and British and others walking the hallways with suitcases of money that they gave to these forces. So if, in fact, there was a united Africa, everybody couldn't be, you got 40 some odd presidents, you got 40 some odd, prime ministers, you got 40 some odd parliaments, and everybody can participate in that. You got 40 some odd militaries. Everybody can be generals. Everybody can be all of these things, and their careers and future were locked in to this setup that the colonizers had imposed on us. So Nkrumah had it right. He definitely had it right. And Nyeri was to say that later. He was to come to Ghana at one of the celebrations they were having about something, and said Nkrumah was right, and talked about how the errors that he had made and not supporting that.
No, excellent, Chairman. I'm going to give it to Brenda. I'm sure she has a couple of questions for you.
Sister Brenda.
Yeah, I just want to kind of bring it back here. So much is going on right now with socialism and these new, what to call them, because I'm not sure, what they are right now. But people are so afraid now that socialism is taking over, and of course they're trying to link it to communism, because that's the other dirty word. But what is your take on? I know, because we know they're pseudo socialists, But I mean, what is your take on moving forward with this confusion? Because as you talked about, the masses rising up, we know that it's the masses, because the conditions is going to push the masses to rise up, and the conditions that we're going to feel shortly, not really feeling it just yet, but all that's going on in the world now with the crazy orange man and all the other people around him, that are because of the crazy moves that are being made, that we're going to be experiencing in terms of food and even safety concerns of all the things that have been rolled back because all these firings and the federal government and whatnot. What do you see happening with our people? Do you see our people rising up in such a way? Because it's going to take us rising up, not these electeds that we have in place, because that's not the answer. So we have to force them, or we have to make the move to make the changes that we need to see. And it can only come about with us, because we have to depend on us. And this communalism basically is repeating itself. And that's what so I'm just saying, what do you see? What do you see?
Well, I think that, as you mentioned, people are rising up, and people are rising up, all over Africa. Yes. People are rising, and you don't even read about it. I mean, the U.S. is involved in more than 100 wars in Africa right now. And then people are rising up, trying to rise up, and will rise up. You will see rebellions. We saw one in Ferguson and St. Louis in 2014, and of course right there in New York, where they killed that brother, selling a cigarette. And they didn't just kill him; they did it in a humiliating, brutal, anti-black way. So people will rise up, but that's not enough, because the rebellion is not a revolution. An uprising is not a revolution. What makes the revolution is the direction is given and the leadership that is given. And the leadership has to be there. And it can't be yelling from afar, standing on the wayside, yelling from afar. We have to be in these communities. We have to be organizing on the ground. We have to be doing the political education. We have to, and the way, we take it on, or try to take it on, when we're at our best, and most often we are not at our best. But I'm talking about now the African People's Social Party and the Uhuru movement. We have a newspaper. Our objective is to have this newspaper and to be in the communities, to begin doing political education with the people who really going to make the difference, in making this happen. We believe that we have a responsibility to seize power wherever it is. On a local level, such as what Operation P.O.W.E.R does do, in the campuses, the PTAs, all of this stuff, wherever it's possible to take the power, we need to take this power, and we need to preach that and win people to that level of organization and understanding. And because people see, as you characterize the Orange Man, but who people don't see that much is Steve Bannon. And Steve Bannon is the guy who in many ways gave coherence to the Orange Man. He was not coherent. He is the one who pulled it all together. He's the one who even right now has created organization and an organization strategy on the precinct level to win on the precinct level. Everybody's looking at these big shots in the presidency and the Senate and stuff like that on the precinct level, because winning on the precinct level was, he determined, could help decide who was going to be the president, because when in a place where you make a decision about who is a legitimate registered voter, where are the voting precincts going to be located? What will be, how will people be allowed to participate? Like in Florida, they came up with a rule: you can't even pass somebody a cup of water standing in a voting line. On this level, he understood that, and we have to organize from the bottom. This is where it really is in our communities, and the critical thing, we are convinced, is the reparations issue for African people, because the reparations issue does more to unify the African world here and every place than any other issue we have had before us. We have a situation where, even coming out of the Caribbean, and now you see happening in Africa, the Caribbean, CARICOM determined that Africans were owed $131 trillion in reparation. That's more than there is money in the world. Do you understand? And the reparations issue, and Africans have locked into that. Sellout Africans, revolutionary Africans, moderate Africans, everybody can unite around the reparation question. The thing is, who leads us? Who provides the leadership? Where is that cadre that will give direction to our movement? And that's what we work on all the time, trying to develop that cadre that will take us home and take us beyond just an uprising. Because the next, what is it, toward what end? This is the question that we ask ourselves. You protesting toward what end? Uprising toward what end? There must be some end. There must be some place that we're trying to go, and we have the responsibility of educating people and putting on the ground the kind of organization capacity to take people where they need to go.
That was
Brenda,
fantastic.
I hope I responded appropriately, Brenda.
Yes, you have. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Chairman, we ran out of time, but we're definitely, this was great. I wish we had another hour. But I wanted, I was hoping that you could give us an update on the W.E.R. I understand there's some level of action that is going to go on in Atlanta. So we're hoping you could talk a little bit about that before we get off the show.
Yeah, thank you so much. Because, as you know, we were attacked on July 29th, 2022. We were attacked by a military assault was made on my home, me and my wife here in St. Louis. We came out of St. Petersburg, Florida, so we had a house in St. Petersburg, Florida. Nobody was there, but they attacked the house in St. Petersburg, Florida. They knocked down the doors. They used flashbang grenades. They quarantined the whole African community. They were using flashbang grenades, terrorizing people and things like that. And they did this without even charging us. They handcuffed me, my wife, behind our backs. They handcuffed Penny Hess, her roommate, Jesse Neville, his roommate, etc. And Jesse and Penny, as you know, are North Americans are white people, which is another interesting thing we don't have enough time to talk about. But so they did all of this, and they told us that we were unindicted co-conspirators, and they didn't tell us. I said, well, let me see. They said we have a warrant that we serving to look in your house and things like that. So let me see the warrant. But anyway, they didn't have the warrant on them, but I was going to see it. I saw it before it was over. They occupied our houses for something like 6 to 8 hours in both instances. They used battering rams, knocked down doors and things like that. They used drones that almost hit my wife in the face when she was coming downstairs, etc. So all of this stuff happened. Then 9 months later, they indicted us. They indicted us for being Russian agents. We were Russian agents without notifying the Attorney General that we were working for the Russians, a foreign government. And we were conspiring to be Russian agents without notifying the Attorney Generals that we were conspiring to be Russian agents. And so the charges combined, 10 years possibility for the Russian agent charge, and 5-year sentence possibility for conspiring to be a Russian agent without registering, and $250,000 fine for all of them. So they were trying to get $500,000 from each one of us, send each one of us to prison for 15 years and what have you. And so we went to court, and they got rid of the only African juror, and it was an incredible woman because she was a woman out of St. Petersburg, Florida, and she was working class. I mean, she came to court in flip flops, you know what I mean? In the Tampa, she had to leave St. Petersburg, come over to Tampa. So she was ours, you know.
Right.
But they got rid of her, so she wasn't able to sit on the jury. They didn't have a single human being witness. The witnesses that they had, 12 FBI agents and 2 people who they paid, professors, so who they said were Russian experts, etc. And so this is what they brought to put us on trial. We did not bring a single witness there. Only thing what we did bring was that because we had extraordinary lawyers. I want to say this right up front. The lawyers were great. And the lawyers had come to understand that the case that they were using the law to carry out political objectives to crush the African liberation movement. The lawyers came to understand that because we worked with them for a year or more, even before we went to trial. And so we had these extraordinary lawyers. And one of whom, by the way, is the son of Naim Akbar, Mutaki Akbar, you know, and there were, you know, 2 others, Addie Griffin and Tom Insky and Angela Rainey. All of these were lawyers, you know, our lawyers. And so we went there. We had the lawyer who Akbar his open statement was, he threw his fists up in the air in the middle of a federal court and went, "Uhuru, Uhuru," and he did it 3 times. And he says that Uhuru in Swahili means freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of association. You're going to be hearing that word a lot during this process. And then he told the people, you're going to be hearing this Russia thing, that's nonsense, etc. So we went to trial, and what the lawyer convinced the judge to do was to allow us to show evidence from videos, stuff like that they were trying to use against us. We showed all these videos. We went all the way, showed video of me in Moscow where they said I was supposed to have been turned into a Russian agent. Showed videos of all the work that we were doing, and the jury saw that. And on the charge of being Russian agents, they declared not guilty on that charge, the 10-year charge. And then they came up with this extraordinary guilty charge of not registering to conspire to be a Russian agent. Right. So that's why we're going to Atlanta now. We're challenging that conviction. And the judge said that nobody's going to jail, nobody's going to be paying any fines, anything like that. And the judge himself said that it doesn't make any sense. He was troubled by the verdict. He said, because how could they even consider us to be involved in the conspiracy if they didn't even have to prove that we knew that a conspiracy was in place, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to court, and we're going to be there in Atlanta. We're calling everybody to come with us to Atlanta. We have to be there. The hearing is on they granted oral arguments, which was unusual and really powerful, which means that the court has a basis of a presumption that a possibility of being victorious. Right. So we're going for oral arguments. They granted, and the other thing is that on the day before, the 21st, we will actually have a rally. The evening of the 21st, the day before the hearing, and then the hearing, we want to fill up the courtroom, and people can get information going to Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off UHURU. .org. You can get all of the other information. Folk are probably leaving out of New York too. So coming into, and we don't fill up the courtroom because it was a political trial then. It's a political situation today, and we're letting everybody know that we know that it's political, and I think that we have a pretty good standing.
Yeah,
Lord.
well, no, I hear you, and at least the report back that we got from Charles Barron was that victory is certain. So we're definitely looking forward to lending our support. So we'll definitely have members in Atlanta on July 22nd. So certainly we're pulling through and pulling for you, man.
Well,
So
thank you so much, Sister
No,
Brenda, Brother Q. Thank you for having us. And,
No,
we really
thank you,
appreciate it.
Chairman. And as always, in closing out, we always say, Chairman, I just want to say, if there's anything else you'd like to add, I'll give you, you can have the last few minutes to do so, man.
Well, if the only thing I would add is that on Tuesday, July 21st, that's the day before the
Right.
actual oral arguments are to be. We'll be at Georgia State University College of Law, and that's at 85 Park Place, Atlanta, Georgia. On Wednesday, the actual hearing, the oral arguments, where we're asking people to pack the court, that will be at Elbert P. Tuttle, Tuttl, Court of Appeals, 56 Forsyth Street, Northwest Atlanta. So we hope people will come out, and we feel pretty good about it. By the way, this is a case where many years ago, not H. Rap Brown, but Julian Bond, who was Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee also, who was denied his seat when he ran for office in Atlanta, who was denied his seat, who appealed, who ran again, won the seat, denied the seat again, and they kicked him out, and he was put back, and he appealed it. And this is the court that he went to, the same court, and he won. So we feel pretty good about it. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, I am going to usher in Brenda to close us out. So Brenda, when you're ready.
All right. So I would thank you again. You're always such a wealth of information. Sit here and listen to you for hours upon hours. So I know we'll be having you back, but we want to thank you for coming again and sharing your knowledge, your unlimited knowledge. And I just want to say, when I call in response, when I say operation, you say power. Operation
Power.
Right.
Our regards to the Barons, and I hope everything was working out well for them. All right.
Certainly, and as always, the truth shall set you free, and
Indeed.
power is a great equalizer.
Right on.
Black power.
Black power. Uhuru.
Uhuru.